Um, all right. So, welcome to conversation today with myself and Emma. In today's chat, we're going to talk about the Open. Even going to go into a little bit of detail about Emma's experience from this year, some of the adversity that she's gone through, and some of the different stages that she's gone through over the last 2-3 years, when how it relates to the Open. Cool. Yeah. So Emma, say what's up.
Hey, it's so good to be here. I have so much to say. It's been about a month that I've been here in Florida training full time with Matt and 4 other athletes, and it's like a dream. It's still just so surreal that this is my life because this is just what I believe I need to do to achieve my ultimate goal. And like I've always thought that, and I didn't know, I thought I would maybe have to achieve that goal in order to make this happen. But it's like I learned that I needed to make this happen by whatever means it took to make the goal happen. And just learning that like the sacrifice and the risk and the big step came first. And it's been amazing so far. Like it's been even better than I thought it would be.
What would you say to the athletes that you know are around your age, around like 17 and 18? They're finishing up high school. They're on the brink, right? They're kind of like they were really good teen athletes. Let's say like I would say like a top 40 in the world would be a really, really good teen athlete. What would you say to them as far as advice goes on what their next step would be through your eyes?
Through my eyes, the next step is mental. It is understanding like, yes, you belong, but at the same time, having the realistic expectations that I maybe didn't have because people are good. Like you think that you have different strengths and weaknesses than you actually do because you're stronger at things relative to the team field. And then whenever the field is different, it's a lot easier to feel like, wow, maybe I like for me, it's like I used to be a good runner. What happened? But it's like I've gotten better at running. I just now have better competition when it comes to running. So there are so many areas like that that will just be shown to you. And I think that the biggest thing I wish somebody would have told me, and honestly, they probably did, I just didn't listen, um, was don't let just some number that's in your head, whether that's first or podium or top 10 or whatever, don't let that define whether you succeed or whether you fail. Like, especially this first year, it's just data. And Matt has really helped me see that, like, in an event that I'm not super happy with. Um, Matt's just like, well, we can't change it, but we can change what we do to be better prepared next time. And just to understand that you can only do as good as you can do with your very best possible strategy. And if that's not the finish you want, like you're going to get back to work, you will get better. And having so much time to improve is really exciting. Um, don't don't mentally beat yourself down before you get into the most exciting part of it. And I'm not even there yet. Like that's a daily struggle for me. Um, it's just always wanting more when like that's good. That's the reason I am where I'm at. But it's also so important for me just to keep my eyes on the process and just learn from everything I do and not just assign a value to everything, not just be like that was good, that was bad. Just be like, oh, that got me better and move on.
For sure. This actually reminds me of your first true competition as a professional or an elite competitor, right? And this brings me back to the Granite Games, where and now knowing what we know now, uh, if we just stick to our game plan of what your best possible strategy is for from event to event, it's going to give us the best possible outcome and not get caught up in the overall competition uh, as much as you should, right? So here's my thought on this is just to elaborate a little bit more. When you go into what you mentioned from a teenager into your first, elite level competition, we really have no idea, right? Yeah, we did the open. Yeah, we did quarterfinals, and we did very, very well. But we realized very quickly by the end of the weekend that that really doesn't give us a true representation of where we are when we go to a semifinal, and even more so when we went to the CrossFit Games. And so there was a couple of speed bumps that we went through mentally when we got to Granite Games and again into the CrossFit Games, where we had high expectations, but we truly had no idea what we were gonna be facing. Would you go to talk about that a little bit before we go into preparing for this season?
Yeah, I think that my very biggest learning experience in competition ever was thrust to run at the Granite Games. I had tested it. It went pretty good. Unbroken. I was able to push the runs. I knew this was going to be a good event for me. And like I got out on the competition floor, got through the set of 18 unbroken. But we started a little bit further down the football field. So I got back to the dumbbells. My shoulders were smoked. And I picked them up and like 3 reps in, I was like, this does not feel like how it did in training. Um, but I was there to win. Like I wasn't just there to win the weekend. I was there to win every event I could. And that's not a bad mindset to be in. But that really, I didn't know how to handle that and control that. So in my mind, I was like, the winner of this event has to go unbroken. I want to be the winner of this event, so I have to go unbroken. Um, that's not how it works because I was not physically capable of going unbroken. Um, Competing as a team, the weights are lighter. Usually it's not as high rep or high skill. And it's like, of course, it involves a lot of fitness, but there's also a lot of just mental toughness and grit and willingness to suffer. And I will do whatever it takes to win. And like in my mind, I just remember telling myself, like, it doesn't matter how much it hurts. Like, you want this. No amount of pain is going to make me break the thrusters. And then, like, the dumbbell hit my head. And I was like, whoa, like, that was not supposed to happen. And instead of being aware, because it was like many reps up until that point had been hard, but I was like, just ignore it, just be tough, you'll be fine. And then I got to the point when it was like, oh, I failed. And instead of being like, oh, that's okay, I can just do 9-6, or I can do 3 sets of 5, like I was like, oh no, like I have to go unbroken. I've already failed. So then the strategy was, I mean, there was really no strategy because my one strategy I already hadn't stuck to. So it was like in my mind, I still had to go as close to unbroken as I could. So I just kept going until I failed the rest of the workout. And it was a pretty high rep workout. Like I came back off the floor upset. Just, I hadn't even done the age group online qualifier because I knew I wouldn't need it. I knew I didn't need a backup plan. I knew I was going to qualify for the games elite. But this was the only time I ever doubted this, was like finishing that event. And it was like, wow, that should have been a good event for me. And I totally fell apart. Like just so many doubts came rushing in. That was the biggest learning opportunity for me because of everything I just talked about, but also because I learned how to put a bad event behind me. Because I've had a lot of finishes that weren't what I expected, and they can't define your weekend. Like if after that event I would have believed I don't belong here, I can't qualify for the games, I wouldn't have. Like I was just able to move on and be like, well, only up from here. And it was. So
Sure.
it's just all learning, even during the weekend.
So we take some of our biggest weaknesses that we found that weekend, and for me, my job is to try our best to work upon that before we get into the CrossFit Games. Now, realistically speaking, and we've had this conversation before, shoulder weakness is something that we knew we needed to work on, but we knew that in a matter of a month it's not going to be like a drastic change. We're not going to all of a sudden be, hitting 12 or 15 unbroken with 15 pounds into hitting 30 unbroken with 50-pound thrusters. That's just not a realistic thing. So from there, we had the conversation where it's, okay, let's learn to work with what we have, right? And even at this point in time, we think that we have a good strategy going into the games. We get through the CrossFit Games, we finish the CrossFit Games, and now we're on the back side of the CrossFit Games, leading into the 2022 season. And then that is kind of like the intro that we just went over, kind of going into the season. Right. And I'm going to fast forward us all the way up to where we start to really dig into the training. We have some really good priorities for you. And, we know that we need to improve our shoulder pressing. We know that we need to improve our aerobic threshold work, right? Some people call that aerobic capacity, work capacity, so on and so forth. Right. So we get into Dubai, and we had something unexpected happen. And we had a minor back injury that set us on a slightly different trajectory when it comes to training, right? So with the move here and having you with me, we took the 2022 season and we said, all right, these are the big priorities that we just talked about. Now, the new priority is health, right? Because now we need to build this huge foundation of strength before, and when I'm talking strength from neck to hip, before we can continue movement forward, right? So what I want you to do here is I'm going to put a pause on that one. And I want you to go back in time, like 2-3 years ago, and talk about what the Open meant to you, what your training looked like for the Open, and what some of your goals were for the Open. And then I'll come back into here and I'll contrast it with how it looks like with where you're at currently.
This year's Open is going to be such a different approach than I used to take. Kind of similar to my mindset at the Granite Games. I thought I needed to win everything, like every stage of competition, every workout in every stage of competition if I could. And even last year's Open, it was the first Open that we were working together. So you did keep me more under control there. But still, it was like this Open workout should be all I do, or at least the first thing I do this day. So I'm completely fresh. Everything needs to be perfect. I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to redo it. I'm going to stress about it. It's going to take away from my training. But that's okay because I want to make a statement. And then it was like walking back to the car after the first day of the games. I was like, wow, the Open didn't matter. Like, I just remember that hitting me. And it was like, I wanted to make a statement in the Open to the world. And I think I did. But the statement I made to myself was, that's not the priority. Like, I don't train to be the Open champion. I train to win the CrossFit Games. Like, every single day, that's like the first thing I think about when I wake up, last thing I think about before I go to sleep. Never is it like, I have to win the Open. You don't have to win the Open to get there. And wanting to do so well in every stage of every competition really took away focus from the ultimate big picture goal. And that was something like Matt told me, other people told me, like, hey, the Open doesn't matter. Don't stress about it. I believed them, but I couldn't really understand them until I experienced it for myself. So that's a big change especially in the first 2 stages of competition this year. Training's a priority because the games are the priority.
And so from a coaching standpoint, it looks like this. When we're talking to our athletes, if you're a coach that has brand new athletes, athletes that are, maybe this is their second or their third year doing Open. If you're a coach that has an athlete that is capable of being, top 200 or top 250 in quarterfinals, or if you have an athlete that is potentially a bubble athlete semifinal, you have to know where your athlete is in their career and what their biggest obstacle is. And what this means is If my athlete did not make it past quarterfinals, the entire year of training is going to be solely based upon getting past quarterfinals. So if my athlete wasn't strong enough, right? Quarterfinals had a 4 rep max front squat. Was that correct? Right.
Yes.
If my athlete didn't have a strong enough, creatine phosphate system like the snatch and the burpee box jump over, it's very sprinty. You need power for that. These are all things as a coach you need to understand, and you need to have the know-how to make it past that stage. It wouldn't make any sense for me if I have an athlete that didn't make it past quarterfinals and I'm doing I don't know, long runs, long swims, high skilled like freestanding handstand push-ups. It doesn't really make sense to train that with my athlete. Instead, I need to be, and I like to use quarterfinals and age group online workouts kind of the same, interchanging, right? Because now we get 4 workouts similar to what we had before in the age group workouts. So we have a lot of history already of what we could potentially see, like rope climbs, heavy barbells, pistols, essentially GHD sit-ups, right? We see these things happening more and more often where it's like, you guys as coaches, you have that out there. And so with Emma 3 years ago, she wanted to make it to the games as a teenager, right? So it's like she needs to do really, really well in the open. She needs to do really, really well in the age group online qualifier. And she was that athlete. She was really good at all those things. And when she got to the games, it continued to sprinkle in and it showed, right? Because you did very well at the CrossFit Games. Now we have a different Emma, right? And then last year you hit it spot on. I believe it was right after Wadapalooza. And this was spoken about on many podcasts before. It was like, we got to aim for the CrossFit Games as an individual competitor, not a team competitor. And this is what your programming is going to look like. And it was from that point forward where it's like, we didn't really have a light barbell in your hand that often because you're an expert at that already. We didn't really do a lot of qualifier style, open style workouts. You did that already. We were doing carries, we're doing strongman stuff, we're doing running, we're doing swimming. We're trying to get as strong as we possibly could. In a year and a half, we became like the top 5 lifter in the world according to these competitions, right? That's where we were currently. Now, fast forwarding, we are here today. All right. You mentioned that the open is not a big priority for you, right? And I love this because if you are a semifinal athlete or if you're a games athlete and you are repeating open workouts, you are doing yourself a complete disjustice, unless of course you go completely haywire, like your phone shuts off, or your judge messes up a rep count or something. You miss like an entire round, right? Where you're going to get a pretty hefty deduction of points. Like those are reasons enough to repeat things. But now we're here with you today. We now have a different focus for the open. Fill everyone in on where you are priority wise, like something that we've been chatting about for the last like week and a half, priority wise, from now into semifinals.
It's been like the setback with my back in Dubai honestly hasn't changed that much, which like I could not see that at all at the time. And I really haven't even seen that until recently. But I can still run. I can still do a lot of upper body strict gymnastics, lots of pushing, lots of pulling. Like my 3 to 4 biggest areas I need to work on have not been affected at all. And now that I'm able to add pretty much everything else back in, I can see how working on my weaknesses has even carried over to my strengths. And it's like I really didn't lose as much as I thought I would. And I've gained so much more physically, mentally, so much more. Like I think that this was like kind of how I talked about the thruster run event being like the biggest learning experience in a workout I've ever had. This has been the biggest learning like adversity few months that I've ever had. And it's also been the hardest and like so many highs and lows. And but it hasn't changed the priorities. And it was never like, oh no, I don't know. Like, what if this stops me from winning the CrossFit Games? It's like, we don't know when that's going to happen, but we know what we need to work on in order for that to happen. And I've still been able to work on those things. Um, Priorities really haven't changed that much. I would say since the games last year, just because it was like, okay, that was a really thorough test. And like now I know what I need to do. You know what I need to do. Even whenever I think like, this is what I should do to get better at like these specific things, you are so good at just breaking it down for me. And it's like, let's get good at the parts of everything before we get good at the whole thing. And these past couple months have really just looked like a lot of different parts of things. And now we're putting them together, keeping those priorities, but really I feel like ramping back up, which is so exciting. And I love it. Like this is kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel of adversity and the silver lining that there always is in adversity.
For sure. And I think for a lot of athletes that have some sort of nagging something, right? Oftentimes taking 2 or 3 steps back, it feels like you're going to lose a lot, right? So, there is a silver lining in everything, right? And you start to figure it out as the pieces start to get thrown back together. Let's say that there's an athlete that has a shoulder injury and they're not able to work on a weakness of theirs, which could be handstand push-up, right? For that athlete, as opposed to being, completely discombobulated that they're not going to be able to improve in strict handstand push-up. Well, guess what? If you don't have a healthy shoulder, you're not going to be able to do anything at all, let alone a strict handstand push-up. So, when these athletes have an issue, don't avoid it, approach it like, okay, I have to strengthen this component of my body, whichever way that needs to be done, whether it's resting or whether it's strengthening some sort of like contrasting muscle around it, whatever the case may be. If it's overtraining and just slowing it down a little bit, there, right, in lies your silver lining. The moment that you start to figure out like, that's what it was, and let me start to work on other areas that may not be a complete strength for you yet. And we've figured out some of those things for you that we know is going to improve when we get past semifinals and back into the CrossFit Games, right? Now, with that being said, I want to talk about one huge silver lining that we've talked about the last few weeks, and that's smart Emma versus last year Emma, right? And we had this comparison of if we put you last year 16th in the world with you today, and nothing has changed at all besides the way you think, right? So let's just say that your all of your attributes, all of your skills and strengths were all the same. The only thing that's changed is your mind. What are some of the things that you can think about that has changed that would allow you to beat that Emma?
I am adaptable when I need to be, and decisive when I need to be. Like last year, I don't want to say it was a struggle because there were so many highs, but a lot more of what I would consider lows, just relative to my expectations. Um, and it was like I would go out on the floor with one strategy, and it was like, this is the winning strategy, and I have to win. Instead of just being realistic with where I am and wanting to maximize what I have to work with. Being adaptable really meant being more in tune with my body's cues, because it's so rare that you're feeling amazing, then all of a sudden you fail a rep. Like usually there's like you feel a certain way, and then your reps get slow or whatever it is. And in training, I had never really paid attention to that. Like I always thought, oh, like if I got to failure halfway through a workout in training, like that's good. That was at my limit. Like I was at my limits, and I thought giving my best meant like I had to be right at my limits the entire workout. And I failed a lot in training. not that you shouldn't fail in training, but you should know how not to fail. And I only knew how to be right at my limits and fail, like fail a lot. And I'm grateful for all of that. But it was definitely learned the hard way on the competition floor. Um, Instead of being able to be more in tune with myself and training and develop that skill. But being decisive is another thing. Like, this was something I kind of struggled with at the games. Like, at the Granite Games, I struggled to be adaptable. And then at the games, struggled some with that, but also struggled to be decisive. It was like, it was almost second guessing how things feel. And it was like, oh, should I change my strategy now? Like, mentally, I have plan A, B, C, D, E. Like, I have lots of backup plans. And sometimes it's hard to know. I mean, you don't know sometimes which plan is the right plan. And like, there will always be that, like, what if? And just learning whenever I need to adapt my strategy, but whenever I just need to be stubborn and hang on, like, that's what I'm really good at. But learning when to use that. And like, the first 2 minutes of a 20-minute workout is probably not the time to use that. And just knowing the difference, with like a little bit of aerobic fatigue. It's like, I can push through this no matter what. Like, this is fatigue that means I can just be tough and gritty and want this, compared to like strict handstand push-ups when it's like, this is not the time to be tough and just push all thoughts of pain out. Like, this is the time to listen. Um, and I had to fail even more in training to finally get a good understanding of that. Um, and it's not like I just have this understanding now. It's something I'm developing every day as I just continue to improve. Everything continues to improve, like, even strategy.
Hmm. And I think this is really big for people that are going into the Open this year. Having an understanding of your body, and this is what you're saying, and the type of workout that you're approaching, right? And I remember when I used to actually fitness a lot more often and approach the Open workout and watch these athletes do the Open workout, and it's like, okay, it's going to be a fun workout. I'm going to have this. These athletes are doing this strategy with this many reps unbroken. I'm just going to do a little bit less than them, and I feel like I can probably do pretty well for myself. And what really ended up happening is, instead of being like, I can probably do this, I really wasn't looking at the workout and understanding my history over the past year, and being able to be more intellectual about my pacing and about my strategy. And here's what I mean by it, because there's so many things to consider. But here's a couple of things that can just like start you off on the right track. Number one is the length of the workout. Is it going to be a workout under 7 minutes? Is it going to be a workout between 8 and 13 minutes? Or is it going to be a workout from 15 minutes or higher? This is like the basis of it. Number two is, what will each movement make me feel? All right. So for the vast majority of people out there, everyone has movements that's going to elevate their heart rate. Everyone has movements that they're going to struggle with strength wise. Everyone's going to have movements that is just going to fatigue them more, like muscle endurance fatigue, right? You guys have to know what yours is and be very smart about breaking those up. And this is a conversation that I have with a lot of my athletes, not just with Emma, but with a lot of my athletes, is when you get into round 5 or when you get into minute 8, what do your reps look like then? And typically it'll be a response like this. Let's say it's 10 ring muscle ups. All right. And I remember having this conversation with James the other day. We had him doing ring muscle ups, rowing, and double presses. And I think something else, but I forget what it was. And I was like, what are your reps going to look like when you're almost done with the workout? He's like, well, I'll probably end up being like 6'4". I was like, let's start off with 6'4". Let's just start there now. All right. And in my mind as a coach, I'm thinking, how can we be the most efficient across this workout without scaling, right? Without slowing down. So if James goes 6'4", he can keep his transition snappy, right? He's not really resting a long way. And then it may give him the opportunity when he reaches the last round to move faster, right? Maybe on the devil press, maybe on the row, maybe the speed of transition between the next one. Maybe instead of 6-4, he goes 8-2, right? Because he's become more efficient. Now, what tends to happen in the open is people are not really thinking about it like that. They're like, well, you're going to do what strategy? Okay, I'm going to try that, and it just becomes a complete shit show because everyone's bodies are completely different on the way they're going to handle things. Everyone's fitness levels are completely all over the board, and it's not really going to be completed or done like that. Here is the hardest part about strategy and pacing. You have to go through it at some point in order to know. And for most of us, you go through it in the moment. You go through it in the open, right? For you, for all the other athletes that we have here in Naples, you guys go through it on the competition floor, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna try to use some of the history that I have from doing this, from this training piece, or from that, and this is why you have me out there with you. Because it's like we get a strategy, we have 1 to 3 macro focus points before we go into an event, and we stick to that strategy to the best we can. And what you've mentioned before is now you're more adaptable, right? So when you get punched in the face in the middle of workout, which it happens, you make a quick sudden change and you're like, okay, now I'm doing this and I'm going to work through it. Something that, we didn't particularly have going into Granite Games because we just simply didn't know. Something that we improved upon when we had gone into the CrossFit Games. And now it's something that continues to get better and better and better. But not to step away from the fact that when these athletes are in the open, or when they're into the quarterfinals, or when they're into the semifinals, they have to know these paces, they have to know these strategies, and they have to be smart with it. Because as you mentioned, the winning pace, whoever gets number 1, right? You can't try to do that. You have to do what's going to be best for you, because you might end up finding that your strategy that gives you your best, and we've said this many times before, Emma's best strategy is going to get her as close to that podium finish as possible. But if we try to step away and do other strategies that we think will win the event, that's where we start to run into some big time hurdles. Right. All right. So now that we are within this year, and we said that the open is not our number 1 goal, right? I think one place where we do need to talk about is programming, right? For programming for you, programming for athletes just like you. We are not programming for the open. Yes, there are some traditional CrossFit style workouts that we'll have fun doing, but from now up until about 2 months before semifinals, it still feels like training. The open workouts that you guys will do on Friday, it's just a fun piece right now, right? It's just you go in there, it's a lot more relaxed atmosphere. Like you have your buddies around you, you do the workout, just make sure everything's filmed correctly in all angles and the judges are counting correctly. And then from there, what happens?
Back to training. Back to working for the ultimate goal. And it's so easy to really get caught up in things, whether those things are like comparing yourself to others, or comparing yourself like to your last year's open finish, or even outside pressure that other people are putting on you, like what will others think? But that's when it's just so important to let that go and be like, I do this for me. I do this for my goal. And it's okay what my process looks like. Like nobody's process should look exactly the same. Even if you have the same goal, you just approach it differently. And like I had a much different approach last year. Didn't work the best, but I'm really excited for how this one will.
With this being said, talk about something. This stuck with me. I think it stuck with you too. Talk about something when you're walking off the Granite Games floor, when you saw Ben Bergeron, what he said to you.
Yeah. I was not happy because I had gone into the last event tied for first. That weekend had so many ups and downs. But finally it was like, wow, how did this, like, it was almost like nothing has gone according to plan, but I'm still in the exact spot that I want to be in. I'm going to hold on, like, kind of stubborn Emma, like, nothing can take this from me, no amount of pain. I'm just going to be tough. Like, all that's great. Um, until I had the heavy dumbbells overhead and like lunged the first 15 feet. And I was like, wow, that was really hard. But never in my mind did I think about setting the dumbbells down. Um, just because, like, again, I didn't want just to win. I wanted to make a statement. Um, and like after the second 15-foot increment, like I had 1 foot across the line. And then my shoulders just like gave out. And it was kind of a big step anyway. Um, and it was like, oh no. And again, instead of like adaptable Emma, it was just stubborn, like, I have to go now. And I picked the dump, like carried them back, picked them right back up, failed again, didn't even finish that workout. Like, that was so far from playing. Like, the worst I had felt that weekend by far. Um, and I was devastated. Like, I knew I was going to the games, but I didn't walk into that weekend like just to get a top 5 spot. I wanted to win. And to feel like I had come so close and didn't was really, really hard. But Ben Bergeron came up to me and he was like, do you know who got third in the East Regional in, like, I think he said 2018? And I thought this was going to be some like really meaningful story. And I'm like, no, who? And he's like, I don't either. Nobody does. Like, they went to the games. You're going to the games. Like, that's what matters. And it was just like, wow, I had never thought about it like that. And that was again something, it was like I heard, I believed it, but I couldn't really understand it until at the games when I was like, wow, this is what I trained for. Like, this is what I trained to win. And however I can get there, like, as long as I get here and I get here to win, I'm happy. Like, that is what's fired me up throughout this season. Where last year it was like, oh, I can't wait for the Open. I'm going to make my statement. Oh, I can't wait for quarterfinals. Like, got to make my statement. Like, semifinals. It wasn't even in my mind to qualify for the games. It was like, I just have to win. Prove stuff to myself, prove stuff to everyone. But it was like, it was hard to see past it. But this year it's like every single day is training for the games. And like, I am different because of that, and I love it.
Yeah. And I think that's a really big takeaway right there is what is most important. You know, there was a few times throughout the year last year where things would happen. And then what I would try to tell you is our goal is still intact. You know, remember what the goal was. It's the games. We're still getting to the games. You know, now that was my version of saying it. Bergeron painted it a little bit differently, but it was the same exact thing. He said it where it was like, you know, I have no idea. And it's like, yeah. And then, you know, I couldn't even tell you who got 4th and 5th place at the Granite Games. And, you know, if you're listening to this, no disrespect at all, but, you know, that's the approach that you guys will be taking moving forward. You like Open, quarterfinals, semifinals, whatever your goal is, do not put too much emphasis and energy. We're not saying don't be an athlete, don't want to win. When you're in an event, program and pace it like you're going to do your best to win the event. Do that within the event, right? And then when the event's done, you know, the emotions are going to be flowing totally fine. You know, when the emotion comes, don't block it out. Take it in, think it over, journal about it if you need to, talk about it with your coach. When the weekend's done, break it down with your coach. Do everything you need to do to get better for the next step. But don't dwell so much on that because you need that precious energy throughout the year. You really, like, you know, the pressure, the feeling of pressure, you got to keep that pressure when you need it the most. Don't apply pressure on unneeded pressure on yourself. when it's not even important. For an athlete that is a CrossFit Games athlete, not for the Open, not for quarterfinals, semifinals. That's a good time, right? You want to get back to CrossFit Games. Give yourself that pressure. It's going to be coming heavy. And at the CrossFit Games, of course, it's going to be there from the moment you step off that plane in Madison, right? Nice. Well, I think that's pretty good. I think that pretty much covers everything as far as where you are within the season. What we focus on now that you're in the position as a elite competitive athlete versus where you were headspace wise as a teen athlete going into the Open. There's a lot of things that I believe there's a lot of takeaways from this that athletes, no matter what level they're in, can pull something out and say, I can see how that can apply with me. It may not be identical, but I can see how that applies with me. Cool. So thanks again, Emma, for jumping on this with me.
This was so fun, and it's just like every day in the gym, so it's cool.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Nice. All right. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.